Hi everyone! I'm pretty sure that the title of this video is going to be something along the lines of what are we preparing for? Um, this is actually a question I get quite a bit. Sometimes it's a little tongue-in-cheek like, okay, you have food and you have medical supplies and you have all of this stuff, but what are you preparing for anyway? What do you think is going to happen? Do you really think that someone's gonna bomb us and we're all gonna be gone for? So we kind of get that question a lot, and I really think that what we're particularly preparing for, I don't hear very often. So I thought it would be kind of unique and fun to talk about. Um, so if anyone is wondering where we've been, I don't know if anyone is. Sometimes people wonder and sometimes they don't. But this is the first video I've made in a very long time, so I will just take a really quick snapshot, just a few minutes, and kind of talk about that a little. If you don't really care about that stuff, just skip ahead like a minute or so. So don't worry about it. I'm not offended if you don't care about my personal life. But we have been struggling a little bit with our off-grid journey. We moved off-grid completely in November of 2020, and shortly after had a stillbirth, um, and was very hard. Uh, Directly around that same time, both of our vehicles broke down, and then we also our savings was drained, quite frankly, just through all of that. And so we really hit this really huge struggle spot for about 5 months, 5 or 6 months, coming out of that in the beginning part of this year. And so I really put YouTube and sharing videos and sharing our progress on hold because I felt that it was more important for my energy and for my focus to be dedicated to our family and some rebuilding. And um, I guess you can say we most definitely went through our own personal crap hits the fan in many ways. So I felt that my energy was a lot more needed in that department than it was dedicating to this. So we took a long time off. um, some pros of that is I hope I look better. I feel better, so I feel a lot more energized to do this, and I have more ideas flowing. I feel kind of back on top of things, so that's good. Another advantage is that we were able to get almost all of our house done, and we've been tiny house off grid living pretty like functional for a couple of months now, which is great. And we have some really awesome ideas of what we're going to do on our property, and some development of how that's going to go. A few drawbacks of being gone is that I was really hopeful to take you guys on this journey with us. I really like to be real and upfront about everything that's happening. The fact that we had like one single walkway going through our tiny house for a long time, where we slept on an air mattress because I couldn't make it up the stairs. Um, and you know, I look forward to bringing you on those really real parts of that journey when you're either living off grid or in a tiny house. You know, it doesn't always look like the pictures on Tiny House Nation where you just move in and it's move in ready. You know, we still have some struggles here, and I want to be really real and upfront so that you can learn from them and gain some understanding from that. So that was a little bit of a downside. There's a lot of that journey that you guys just didn't come along with because I didn't film. But hopefully we can. I'm going to try to be a little bit more on top of that about filming more in those struggles and what we're doing. I might just do a separate update video on some things that are happening too, if you're interested in that, so that I can just sort of show you around and you can kind of see what we're working on. All right, so what are we preparing for? We're preparing for comfort. I'm sure that's probably not the answer you were thinking, but that's really what I want. What we would like the most is that as the world fluctuates and it ebbs and flows and there's issues and all of those other things happen, that we can maintain our level of comfort. And through being off grid, one thing that I recognized very quickly is that if you are not comfortable you're not going to accomplish very much. Comfortable does not have to mean luxury. Comfortable does not have to mean that you have every single thing your heart desires. We certainly don't. But what it does mean is that you're able to wake up in the morning and function normally in your own house, and that you're not constantly in a state of stress, anxiety, just like blah all the time. That's really, really important, because if you don't have that, you're going to burn out. And you're going to burn out quickly. What made me think of this the most was, I often hear people who have bug out locations, or might say something like, oh, we've camped a lot, so it's fine. And I think real life is that as the world changes and as we have to become more off-grid and more self-sufficient in order to live comfortably, those things we're going to have to do simultaneously with everything else. Like, I still have to work even though we're living off grid. So, I can't just say, well, I have the entire day to do laundry, dishes, showering and things like that. These things that take a long time when you're off grid, I still have to fit into a schedule that has a job involved, because we're still part of the world. And so, I was really thinking about, I want to be able to prepare for comfort. I want to be able to be prepared for this idea that parts of society or parts of infrastructure in society are going to be collapsing, but we still have to accomplish our day-to-day goals. We still have to homeschool. We still have to shower, hopefully. We still have to cook and clean and do laundry. All of those things still have to happen. We still earn a paycheck. So we really, really wanted this idea of comfort. That's what we're preparing for. So let's think of a quick example, a couple examples. On the spectrum, there's this huge spectrum of preparedness, right? Like, all the way down to, well, you just carry some Band-Aids with you in case, all the way up to kind of what we're doing, where we're 100% off-grid, and trying the best that we can to become self-sufficient. So there's this really huge spectrum, and throughout this journey we've fallen somewhere in between. We're not 100% to self-sufficiency, and I don't know when or if we'll get there. So, there's this huge spectrum. So I'm going to kind of just give a couple of examples along that spectrum to just kind of show where we've been at, and then also where you could be at with this. So, one is just, I've thought a lot about these shortages that we've had in the past year and a half. Anywhere from in the very beginning of the pandemic, where like almost all the shelves were empty, all the way to now, where when you go to the store, there's quite a few more holes than there used to be, but things kind of come in rotation slowly. And for our comfort level, what we do is we store the food that we use, the household supplies that we use, the toiletries that we use. In case we go to the store and it's not there, we don't have to go without. So, for instance, something that we store is soap. And I know that in the very beginning of the pandemic, it was actually very, very difficult to find soap. It was actually incredibly difficult to find soap. And we were okay, though. So it was very difficult to find soap in the very beginning there. And because we had enough at home, we weren't uncomfortable. We weren't looking at ourselves like, okay, water showers for a little while. We were comfortable. Another example, a little bit different part of the spectrum, is, what if we lose a job? What if we're unable to work for a while? This did happen when I became ill last year. It was several months that I was unable to work, and then my husband was unable to work towards the end because we moved to a different state, and so he wasn't able to find a job right away. And so what happens if we're unable to work? Can we still have the things that we need to make us comfortable? Can we still pay our bills for a little while? Can we still have food, household supplies, toiletries? What about electric bills? Can we still have these things? And then really at the opposite end of that spectrum, at the very end, is what happens if there is something catastrophic, like a very, very large war or an EMP, something really, really huge where we lose power for a very long time. We lose supply chain for a very long time. Do we then have the things to make us comfortable? And that was something that had prompted us to move off grid, was because we thought, there's really not a fantastic way to have those things. We felt in our area there wasn't a fantastic way to have those things unless we had our own property, and we had our own sources of electricity and our own sources of water. And so we felt really led to make that a more serious part of our lives. So that's really where we're coming from, is we want to make sure that no matter what happens in the craziness, we stay even. That as the world's going like this, because it will, probably for a lot longer than any of us are going to be alive, that we can stay like this, that we're okay. We can hear all of those things happening, and we can see all of them happening. We can be aware of all of them happening, but we get to stay steady and we get to stay comfortable. So that's really, really the goal. Something that gets really wrapped up into this that I try to be careful of is that I don't become arrogant. That I don't become arrogant in thinking that these things can't happen. We very much could see a war on American soil. We very much could see something like an EMP go off. We could see natural disasters, and we do every day. So not to become arrogant enough that we can feel like I don't have to have anything set up for my comfort, or to be arrogant enough to believe that somebody else has to take care of me if I'm uncomfortable. If I live in a city and the power goes out, I think it's an arrogant thing to believe that the government should come and save me from that situation, and that it's not my own responsibility. But then also not being arrogant enough to assume that I know what's going to happen, right? So this is kind of back to that original question of what are you preparing for? Well, if I say I am preparing for the Russians to drop an EMP right on top of our heads, I think that's a little arrogant to assume that I know what's going to happen in the future and that is singularly what I'm preparing for. Quite frankly, nobody really knows what will happen. I know that we have ways of being able to look at a situation and say, there's a pretty high probability that this might happen, or through history we've seen this repeat itself. I mean, that's very important to be able to have those critical thinking skills, and we still don't know what's going to happen. And so being able to say, I just want my comfort through whatever happens, and these are some safety nets that I've put in place to be able to accomplish that. So how does this help me look at the world or the news through a different lens? Because just like everyone else this past year and a half, I've sometimes struggled being able to look at the news. It's overwhelming. When you think of all of the doom and gloom that could potentially be surrounding us, it's really hard to not think, either one, there's just so many things to prepare for, why bother? And it's also hard not to think, I have to prepare for everything because the world could end at any moment. So how does this help me look through a different lens? Well, what I look at is, how will this situation that I'm reading in the news, that I'm seeing on a video, that I'm hearing about through somebody else, how would it affect my comfort? Does it affect my comfort? And if it does, then how can I make myself more comfortable through it? What can I do to increase my comfort level if that's going to affect me? There's a pretty good example of this. It has been this fairly widespread meat shortage. Seems like everywhere there's lots and lots of holes in the store of meat products, and I know that last year there was a lot of supply chain issues with meat. So how does this affect my comfort level? Well, it actually doesn't. I don't keep up with it very often. We have chosen to be vegan, and so it doesn't affect me very much. What I do keep up on is how severe the shortage is. rising costs of meat doesn't affect our comfort very much, and rising or lower supply chain doesn't really affect our comfort very much because we don't eat it. So it doesn't really affect us in that way. But if there's no meat on the shelves at all, it will absolutely affect our comfort, because without the availability of meat, people who eat meat will have to turn to something else. They'll have to turn to potentially other supply chains, or things like beans, rice, lentils, other protein sources that we do eat, and it could drive those prices up. So that really helps me set aside like what I need to be focused on and then what I don't. And it's not so overwhelming anymore. To be able to listen to the news, you know. Another example that actually does affect us greatly is I am constantly concerned about oil because we have gas in our cars, of course, just like everyone else, but we currently run our house on a gas generator, and we are utilizing that electricity often in the specific situation and circumstances that we're in right now. We're utilizing that very often, and so our quote-unquote electric bill goes up very high if gas prices also go up. So that's actually a situation I'm looking at a lot, because it would make us very uncomfortable if we couldn't afford to have some gas for a while because gas prices were too high. So see, now I can kind of distinguish, is this going to affect my comfort, and by how much? And if it's affecting my comfort a lot, then okay, I'm going to keep an eye on it a lot so that I can kind of, hedge against that as much as possible. And if it doesn't affect my comfort very much, then I can let it roll off my back. And that really, really helps me distinguish what's important and what's not. So this concept of preparing for my comfort level as opposed to preparing for a specific event really, really helps me to be able to narrow down what events are significant to me and what are just, the news, getting another breaking story, which they always do. They will continue to do so for the rest of our lives. So it really helps me have the ability to distinguish those things. One last final note. I'm going to try in the description to kind of get these things, out to, if you want to kind of skip to some of these parts. But if you are just starting out and you're like, this is great, yes, I want to prepare for my comfort, I want to be able to do this, and you are kind of like, I don't know where my comfort level is at though. I don't know. I've never, either you've not really gone without some of these things for a while. I didn't know where some of my comfort level was until we went completely without electricity and water for a while, and then I was like, okay, these things matter most. Maybe that's where you're at. Something that you can do is just take a weekend, turn off your lights, go in the basement, turn off your water, and just see what you miss the most. It probably won't even take the full weekend. You're probably going to find out in a couple of hours, quite frankly. But take a weekend and just do it. Suffer a little. And you're going to find out what's the most important to you. Some of the things that I thought I could live without, I really don't want to live without. And then some things that I thought I would really need, it turns out that I could have comfort without them, and it was okay, and it didn't bother me very much. So just take that one weekend and kind of really take that step back and say, oh, I really missed whatever it was, and then you can know kind of where to start your preparedness. I hope it was helpful. I know this was kind of a longer video, but I really wanted to fit all of that information in there. So I hope that you guys have a really blessed week, and I hope that you're able to get some prepping done. Bye!